There is a pain you cannot name. It is not a clear wound, nor a sharp pain that knocks you down. It is a vague but persistent feeling, creeping into your mornings, into your long meetings, into your seemingly perfect moments of joy. A feeling as if you are missing out on your own life, even though everything on the surface is still running smoothly. Have you ever looked back and asked yourself, am I living, or am I just going along? Is the life you are living truly your choice, or is it just an unconscious reflex in response to the expectations of your parents, society, and the fear of falling behind? You work hard, set goals, cross things off like a soldier, but deep down, there is something that has never been touched. A part of you, silent for too long, is silently calling for attention. Carl Jung called it the unlived life. He believes that each of us is born with a deeper, more expansive self, but few dare to embark on the journey to meet it. Instead, we live in a mask called a persona, the version we present to the world to be recognized, loved, promoted. But the longer we wear it, the more the mask becomes our true face. And the soul, with all the unspoken dreams, all the buried emotions, all the unanswered questions, is left behind. That pain you feel but can't express is a signal, a small crack in the wall of busyness, a silence in the noise of life. And the scary thing is not that you hurt, but that you get used to it. You call it normal. You learn to mute it with Netflix, deadlines, fleeting relationships, or dreams that aren't yours. But what if you stop running? What if you stop long enough to listen? What emerges from the deepest part of you, where all control is lost? Jung once said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." The most terrifying thing is not to be abandoned by someone, but to face yourself with no defenses, no one to blame, no place to run. But it is from that moment of confrontation that a new path can open up. This journey is not for the faint of heart. It does not come in one big shake-up, one course, or one inspiring sleepless night. It begins with a simple, honest question. Am I living a life that is quietly draining me every day? If so, this is not the end. This is the beginning. Not to fix your life, but to start living it, truly. Not by trying to do more, achieve more, prove more, but by having the courage to listen to a part of yourself that you have long refused to trust. And who knows, from that quiet space, a familiar voice will ring out, leading you back. Not to become someone else, but to return to being yourself. There are moments when you sit in the midst of your own success and feel empty. Even though your job is stable, your reputation is on the rise, your schedule is full of appointments and plans, you still feel like you are just drifting through life like a temporary guest. You used to think that if you achieved these things, you would be happy. But then, when everything is present before your eyes, the only thing you realize is a silent question. Why is it not enough? It is not a crisis of lack. It is a crisis of meaning. And it is one of the most dangerous crises, because no one sees it but you. You still smile, still work, still get compliments. But deep inside, a part of you is disconnected. Everything you are doing seems to be just replaying a script that someone else wrote long ago. Carl Jung called this stage the moment when the persona, the social self, the mask you wear to live in the collective, begins to crack. Persona is not a bad thing. It is what helps you fit in, what helps you stand out, what helps you survive in this world. But the problem is that when you start believing that you are that mask, you also lose the deepest part of yourself, what Jung called self, the whole being that is much larger than any role you have ever played. You are taught how to succeed, how to impress, how to be the best person in the room. But very rarely does anyone ask you, what really makes you alive? You try so hard to do the right thing, to fit in, that you forget to ask, what does it mean to me? And one day you realize that you are living a life of achievement, but of emptiness. A life that may look right to others, but is completely meaningless to you. The crisis of meaning does not erupt in a spectacular collapse. It comes by losing interest in the very thing you once loved, by making you procrastinate unconsciously, with sleepless nights when you don't know why, with a fatigue that doesn't come from work, but from a kind of mental exhaustion. When you're constantly running a person you don't recognize anymore. This is the moment when some people change direction, but many do the opposite. They try to do more, speed up, achieve more, get busier, control more, because the ego doesn't accept meaninglessness. It uses achievement to fill the void left by meaning. And this cycle continues until the body is exhausted, the mind cracks, or some event forces you to stop. Jung believed that a crisis of meaning is a sign that your self is trying to awaken. It's not a sign of failure. It's a call. When everything out there no longer feels enough, it's your inner voice speaking up. You might think, but I didn't do anything wrong. I'm just living the way society taught me to. And you're right. But that's the problem. You're living correctly according to a standard, not truly to yourself. And a correct life without true will always lead to a breakdown. The question isn't whether you're successful. It's whether you're still connected to your deepest self. The question isn't how many roles you're living. It's whether any of those roles are you. The truth is, you can't find meaning outside yourself if you haven't turned inside yourself. No job, no lover, no summit can fill the void of an unrecognized soul. And the sad thing is, most of us are abandoning our own souls, believing that being correct is enough. But you can start over. You don't have to throw everything away. Just start asking the questions you forgot. Who am I when no one is looking? What makes me truly alive? If I had nothing to prove, how would I live? These questions may not have immediate answers, but they are a starting point. They are the first opening out of the maze of the programmed self. And if you dare to follow them, even if at first just one small step, one honest moment at a time, then the crisis is no longer a disaster. It becomes an invitation to return to living a meaningful life. Not because someone needs you to, but because you deserve it. Because your soul has waited long enough to be fully alive. Carl Jung once said, "Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakens." Your life does not begin with an answer. It begins with a look, for the first time, inside. And when you dare to look, everything changes. It's not the world out there, it's how you live in it. And that's when life begins to make sense. Not because you do something else, but because you finally begin to truly be present in it. The crisis of meaning, when it comes, is not an end. It is a beginning, but not a pleasant one. It is a door leading down, not up. And to truly embark on the journey of transformation, you cannot simply go around your ego. You must go through it. Carl Jung called this stage the descent. And it is an essential part of any healing or spiritual awakening. No one begins the journey to becoming themselves from the light. All true awakening begins in the darkness. Not the darkness outside, but the darkness within. The place where the things we have denied, the memories we want to forget, the truths we dare not look at. And herein lies the paradox. You have to go down to go up. You have to dare to fall into yourself in order to come back to a truer, more whole version of yourself. The descent is often unexpected. It comes in the form of a breakdown. A relationship breaks down. A job suddenly loses its meaning, an inexplicable loss, or simply a day when you no longer recognize yourself when you look in the mirror. From the outside, everything may look fine. But from the inside, you know something is broken. In mythology, heroes do not become heroes by staying on the surface. They have to leave their villages, go into the jungle, fight monsters, get lost in the dark, lose their way, and sometimes lose themselves. Orpheus had to descend into hell. Dante had to pass through the deepest levels of hell before he could reach heaven. Siddhartha had to leave his palace to sit under the Bodhi tree. These stories are not just fairy tales, they are psychological metaphors for the journey each person must take if he is to reach his true self. Jung believed that all transformation of consciousness begins with a dissolution. But it is in that disintegration that the neglected parts of the soul have a chance to speak. When the persona cracks, the darkness can step out. And it is when everything you have ever identified with the self collapses that you have a chance to reach something deeper, the self that is whole, complete, vast and truer than any role you have ever played. The problem is, we are not taught how to descend. We are taught how to ascend, how to succeed, how to overcome. We are afraid to stop, afraid to face, afraid to not know. But the truth is, you cannot embark on a true journey unless you are willing to fall. And you will fall. Not into hell in the religious sense, but into the deepest depths of yourself. Down into the questions you have avoided. Down into the pain you have suppressed. Down into the parts of yourself you have never dared to acknowledge. And it will hurt. It will be confusing. There will be no map. There will be no guide. There is no 7-step roadmap to finding yourself. There is only you, with the naked truth. You no longer know who you are. But it is there that life begins again. Because when everything familiar falls away, you have nothing left to protect. And when you have nothing left to protect, you can be truly honest. With your sadness, with your longing, with what was once considered weak, ugly, unworthy. And in that honesty, a small door opens. Not loudly, not grandly, but truly, alive, rooted. Jung said that this process is not for the faint of heart. It is the death of the old self, and no one can bypass it. You have to stay in it. Sit with the pain without immediately seeking to soothe it. Look directly at the fear without running away. Be silent in the chaos within without trying to rationalize it. You have to let things fall apart, so that something real can be born. You may feel lonely. You may feel lost. But that's not a mistake. It's a sign that you're on the right path. Because it's only when you stray from the old path that you have a chance to find your own. And in that descent, you will not find a perfect self. What you will find first is the forgotten part, the wounded child, the dead dream, the anger that was never allowed to be spoken. And if you are patient enough not to retreat, if you are brave enough to stay, you will begin to realize all those parts are not enemies. They are clues. They are keys. They are the voice of the soul seeking to return. So when your life begins to crack, do not fix it. Observe. When you feel like you no longer know who you are, do not redefine it. Listen. When all your goals suddenly seem meaningless, do not set new goals. Stop. Because most likely, you are not failing. You are being summoned. And that is a blessing in disguise. The journey begins not with a step forward, but with a descent. And it is in that depth that you will meet the part you have forgotten, the part you have denied, the part you never dared to believe was you. And when that happens, you no longer live as a fragment. You begin to live as a stream, no longer a copy of an expectation, but the original self, gradually returning, entering the depths of your journey. You will soon meet a strange and unpleasant visitor. It is not someone else. It is the part of yourself that you have never wanted to acknowledge. Carl Jung called it the shadow, and he believed that if you do not face your shadow, you will spend your whole life under its unconscious control. The shadow is not something dark in the simple sense of the word evil. It is all the parts of you that have been repressed, rejected, considered inappropriate, not worthy of being seen. It could be the anger you were forbidden to express as a child. It is the desire you have learned to deny in order to be accepted. It is the jealousy, the inferiority complex, the selfishness, or even the talents and strengths you have given up because they do not fit the mold you were taught. The shadow is not only something you hate about yourself, but also something you do not dare to believe you have. The danger of the shadow is that it does not disappear just because you do not acknowledge it. On the contrary, it operates in the shadows. And the longer it is suppressed, the more it influences your behavior in subtle and unexpected ways. Unreasonable outbursts of anger, impulsive actions that you later regret, harsh judgments of others, all are signs that the shadow is at work. Jung once said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." What irritates you about others is not simply about them. It is a mirror of the part of yourself that you have not integrated. If you see someone who is arrogant and reacts strongly, there may be a part of you that has been taught that confidence is bad. If you criticize others for being weak, there may be a part of you that has been strong for too long, and that part of you that is weak is being rejected. Every person you hate is a mirror. And when you have the courage to look into that mirror, not to criticize but to learn, you begin a whole new phase of your journey. Integration. The shadow doesn't need you to destroy it. It just needs to be seen. But to do that, you have to let down your ego's defenses. You have to overcome your shame, your fear of judgment, and your need to be good. Because inner growth is not about being perfect, but about being able to fully accept imperfection. Integrating the shadow is not an easy process. When you start observing yourself, you will see yourself reacting in ways that you thought were only bad people. You may discover that you are capable of deception, control, manipulation, or that you crave attention, of being in demand, of being superior. You will see that the truth is not always beautiful, but it is necessary. Because only when you dare to accept the whole picture can you step out of the loop of unconscious reactions. Not integrating the shadow means you live in fragments. One part of you is trying to be right, while another part is repressed and comes out in the form of anger, blame, or self-destruction. Every time you are strongly triggered, when you overreact to a seemingly small situation, that is when the shadow is rising. And instead of asking, "Who is wrong?" you need to ask, "What in me has been touched?" Jung called the process of integrating the shadow the first step in the journey back to the self. There is no wholeness if you are still divided into two halves. The half that is performing for the world, and the half that is imprisoned in the unconscious. When you begin to accept the shadow, you will find yourself becoming softer but also stronger, because you no longer have to use so much energy to control, to hide, to act. True freedom begins when you are no longer afraid of yourself. Integrating the shadow is also the most courageous act because it goes against everything you've been taught. You've been taught to be kind, to be patient, to be in control. But the truth is that underneath that shell may be an unspoken anger, a cry for help from your inner child, a wild part of you that you've denied to become acceptable. And when you allow all of that to be present, without judgment, without pushing it away, you begin to tap into a new kind of power, a power that comes from honesty and integration. The shadow isn't just negative either. Jung emphasized that many people suppress their own talents and light because they've been taught that they're unworthy, that shining is arrogant, that living is selfish. In the shadow is not just a wound, it's potential. Not just anger, it's passion. Not just fear, it's intuition. When you start working with the shadow, you don't just heal. You are also releasing a life force that has been locked away in your unconscious. The shadow does not come to destroy you. It comes to remind you that a part of you is missing. And like a child, it will do anything to get attention, even by destroying, by acting out, by dragging you into chaos. But if you step closer to it, listen to it, and don't run away, you will find that it begins to soften. Not because it has changed, but because you are ready to embrace it. Jung said that the shadow cannot be eliminated. It can only be transformed. And the transformation begins when you have the courage to look into the mirror, not to beautify yourself, but to truly see. Not to become a better person, but to become a more authentic person. When you live in harmony with your shadow, you are no longer controlled by it. You react less, you observe more, you forgive more, you love more. You stop living as someone who is controlled by parts of yourself that you don't understand, and start living as someone who has met yourself and is no longer afraid. The shadow, in essence, is the soul's biggest mirror. And if you are brave enough to look into it, what you will see is not just pain. It is you whole, not fragmented, no longer running away. That is where the journey truly begins to take shape. It is no longer a search for meaning in the outside world. It is a return to what has always been there. You, in your entirety, in the light and in the dark. Once you begin to recognize the shadow, another phenomenon will silently appear and try to pull you away from the journey: distraction. It is no coincidence that the moment you are about to reach your deepest self is also the moment you start to seek the most escape from yourself. You open your phone, scroll aimlessly. You work continuously, without stopping. You rush into new relationships, new experiences, new projects, as if standing still for a second is unbearable. Distractions don't always come from negative things. They come from things that seem normal and useful. It's the habit of always having a podcast on, always needing someone around, always having something going on. It's the schedule that's so packed you can't remember why you did each one if someone asked. It's the exhausted evenings when you turn on another video, get caught up in another story, just to avoid sitting down with yourself. Carl Jung understood this mechanism very well. He believed that the closer we get to our inner truth, the more sophisticated strategies we develop to avoid it. Not because we are weak, but because we are afraid of what we will encounter if we sit still. Afraid of the sadness that we have never named. Afraid of making the wrong choices. Afraid that our lives have been programmed by other people's expectations. And to avoid facing that, we choose distraction. Distraction is a form of comfort. It makes us feel that we are still alive, still moving, still trying. But in reality, we are just running around a center that we dare not touch. And the more we run, the more exhausted we become. But here is the paradox. That very exhaustion makes us cling to distraction even more tightly, because we believe that if we stop, everything will collapse. Jung once said that what you avoid does not disappear. It just changes form, sinks deeper into the unconscious, and waits for the right moment to emerge. And one of the most common manifestations of this is repetition. You continue to attract the types of relationships that hurt you. You repeat the same patterns of behavior that drained you. You choose the same dead ends, not because you're stupid, but because you're being led down the same paths that led you to dead ends. Distraction, when it becomes a way of life, is no longer entertainment. It becomes an addiction to being busy, an addiction to being watched, an addiction to being recognized, an addiction to doing something. And in all of these addictions, the one thing you're not doing is listening to yourself. The shadow cannot be integrated into the noise. The soul cannot speak when you're constantly being pulled away. And meaning cannot be found unless you accept a long enough silence to hear something deeper than the tapping of a keyboard, the buzzing of a notification, or the quick compliment. True freedom begins when you choose not to react. When you stop before you rush to do something more. When you learn to sit with the emptiness without immediately filling it with activity. And you will see that emptiness is not killing you. It is just a space you forgot because you were too busy running away. Jung called it the pre-birth moment. Before you can give birth to a new you, you must dare to stay in the space between the two versions. The old you that no longer fits, and the new you that has not yet formed. And it is in that nameless silence that you will begin to feel signals so subtle, so gentle, yet so real. A voice that is strange yet familiar. A clear feeling that does not come from the mind. A forgotten intuition. But this cannot happen if you continue to ignore it. Not if you still think that one more inspirational video, one more self-help book, one more deep relationship will solve it all. The truth is, nothing out there can give you what you already carry inside, if you don't dare to step into that place. The question is no longer, what do I need to do next? The question is, What have I not dared to feel for long enough? And to answer that question, you don't need more knowledge. You need silence. You need to cut back. You need to turn back. Distraction is the easy way, but it gets you nowhere. Only when you dare to step out of it do you begin to truly live. Not in a rush to prove, but in clarity and connection. Because the deepest things cannot be heard through the noise. They only come when you have the courage to turn it all off. And sit, alone, with yourself, in truth, in silence, in freedom. After you have faced your shadow, overcome the layers of distraction, the journey is not over. On the contrary, it has only truly begun. And what is beginning is not a sudden, dramatic transformation, not a resounding breakthrough as you once expected. It is a silent, slow, profound revolution. A process that Carl Jung called individuation, becoming fully yourself. Individuation is not self-development in the usual sense. It is not aimed at helping you become better, more effective, or more successful in the eyes of others. On the contrary, it is a journey of removing each layer of mask, each layer of conditioning, each imposed expectation so that you can reach the only thing, the truth of who you are. According to Jung, every human being is born with a self, a complete being, with the potential to develop fully. But to be able to live as self, you must go through a process of differentiation and reintegration. Differentiation between the false self and the true self, between what you have learned to accept and what you are, and then integrating all the fragmented parts, including the parts you have denied, into a state of inner unity. Individuation is the journey from self to wholeness, from who you think you should be to who you have always been, before the world started telling you how you should live. Unlike behavioral change or positive thinking methods, individuation does not try to force you into an ideal. It does not push you forward with external forces. It pulls you back to your roots, back to unhealed memories, back to intuitions that were dismissed as irrational, back to parts that seem contradictory but actually need each other to form a living whole. Individuation is not a project to be completed. It is a way of life, and it requires a deep commitment to yourself. You no longer act to be seen, but to express your inner truth. You no longer choose the path of least resistance, but the path that is most in tune with your soul. You no longer live to avoid mistakes, but to discover your authenticity, even when it is uncomfortable. This process often begins with a separation. You begin to feel out of touch with what was once familiar. Your old environment, your old relationships, your old roles. You may still be stable on the surface, but deep down, you know something is changing. Something is slowly melting away to make room for something else, unclear, but very real. And at that stage, it is easy to feel lost. You are no longer your old self, but you are also not sure who you are. You may be called strange, changed, distant, but all those feelings are signs that you are moving from within. Because individuation is not about making yourself more understandable to others. It is about making yourself unmistakable. The revolution is this. You start living without the need for approval. You no longer seek confirmation that you are right, you are good enough, you are lovable, because that is no longer the goal, but the natural consequence of being true to yourself. When you live as yourself, without the need to justify, without the need to prove, you become clear. And that clarity is a relief, even if those around you may not understand. Individuation does not make you perfect, but it makes you whole. And there is a big difference between perfect people and whole people. Perfect people try not to make mistakes. Whole people are willing to look at mistakes in order to learn and integrate. Perfect people live to meet expectations. Whole people live to be present. Perfect people need roles. Whole people just need to be themselves. The thing is, you can't force individuation. You can't plan it out in detail, set goals, and try to complete it like a time management project. Jung emphasized that this is an internal, living process, where the unconscious plays an irreplaceable role. Symbols, dreams, sudden emotions, vague intuitions, all are the language the self uses to guide you. And you need to learn to listen, not with reason, but with silence and presence. Going through this journey also means learning to love the parts of yourself you used to hate. Love uncertainty. Love not knowing who you are. Because in that not knowing, you are creating space for the truth to be born. You will have to let go of many things. Identities built on expectations, values borrowed from others, standards you have never questioned, but not to become a new person, but to make way for the real you inside to come out. And from there, you begin to live with a very different kind of peace. No longer the peace that comes from control, but the peace that comes from oneness. You no longer need everything around you to be comfortable, because the lightness is already inside. You no longer have to strain yourself to maintain an image, because the image is no longer as important as the living entity that you are. Individuation is an awakening that needs no declaration, a transformation that needs no noise, a breaking down that needs no witness. But from there, you become someone whose presence is enough to touch others, not with words, but with the wholeness that you carry. And from there, you no longer need to look for yourself anywhere else. You have arrived, not somewhere far away, but where you left off, right in the heart of your being, right in the heart of what you call me. No one else, no more. But deep, deep, right to the roots. It is a silent revolution, a revolution without firing a single shot. But when it happens, you will never be the same again. Because for the first time, you are not just living, you are. And you are free. When the process of individuation reaches its true depth, you will be faced with an inevitable reality. To live as yourself, you must let a part of yourself die. This is not a physical death, but a psychological death. The end of the versions of yourself you once held onto, the identities that once felt safe, the beliefs you thought were unchangeable. The death of the old self is the most painful stage, but it is also the essential condition for something new to be born. Carl Jung understood this well. He once said that no one enters the depths of consciousness without some degree of disintegration. Those who have lived to please will face isolation when they begin to set boundaries. Those who have used work as a pillar of meaning will feel like they are collapsing when work is no longer enough to nourish their inner selves. Those who have identified with strength and resilience will have to learn to accept their softness, their vulnerability, their helplessness. The old self will not go smoothly. It will rebel. It will tell you all the reasons why you should not change. It will cite fear, guilt, doubt, and loneliness. It will whisper that if you let it go, you will be nothing. And the irony is, it is right. You will be nothing, at least for a while. You will fall into the neutral space between the dead and the not yet born. You will be lost in your own life. And no one can really walk with you through that. But that is the nature of the rite of passage. No rebirth happens without a dissolution. No newness emerges while the old is still in control. And no one enters the true depth of their being without letting something in them die. The death of the old self is not just about letting go of a role or an environment. Sometimes it is a deeper letting go. Letting go of the way you used to see the world. Letting go of the logic that helped you survive but no longer serves you. Letting go of relationships built on the complicity of the old self. Letting go of the addiction to being understood, to being recognized, to being loved the way you used to know. You will lose things you thought you needed. You will find people you were close to drifting away. You will find the goals that once motivated you becoming meaningless. You will feel yourself falling out of the orbit of society, of your loved ones, of your former self, and you will want to go back, want to reconnect with what is familiar. But each time you go back, you will find yourself no longer fitting in, not because the place has changed, but because you have changed. This is a time of choice. You can choose to return to your comfort zone, to continue living in compromise, to continue wearing a mask that fits the world. Or you can choose to step into the unknown, where everything is unclear but full of promise. But remember, there is no path to true freedom without letting go. And the price of truth is always the death of a part of the lie. This death does not have to be dramatic. It can come in very quiet moments. One time you refuse a conversation that no longer makes sense. One time you say no instead of continuing to indulge. One time you sit in silence instead of trying to explain. One time you let someone go without holding on. Each of those small actions is a sign. You are letting the old you fall apart to make way for something bigger to come in. And then, in a moment that no one notices, in the middle of days that seem to repeat themselves, you will realize that you are different. You will no longer react the same way. You will no longer need the things that used to make you anxious. You will no longer try to fit in. You will no longer need to be someone else. You will just need to be yourself. Carl Jung called this stage the process of restructuring the self. When the old self dies, the self, the whole self, has room to express itself. And from then on, you no longer live from the outside in. You live from the inside out. Not to control the world, but to be in harmony with it. Not to win, but to live. You may not get everything you thought you wanted, but you will have something more precious, the truth. And in that truth, you will find peace. Not because everything is okay, but because you have learned not to hide from yourself anymore. The death of the ego is not an end, but a beginning. Not of a new person, but of the real person. And that is the only thing that can save. Not from failure, but from forgetting yourself in the cycle of the world. When the old person is gone, you will stand in a space of opening. And in that space, something quiet will speak. Not loudly, not urgently. Just a steady, deep breath. The breath of your true self slowly coming to life within you. And that is where a new chapter begins. Not based on the old script. Not waiting for permission, but born of itself. From that dissolution, after the old self disintegrates, the first thing that awakens is not a new, glorious self, but an ancient, forgotten language, the language of the soul. It is not words. It is not reasoning. It does not come from the conscious mind. It speaks in symbols, in dreams, in feelings that cannot be explained but cannot be denied. And if you are quiet enough, sensitive enough, you will begin to hear the call from the deepest part of you, the call that Carl Jung believed was the door to wholeness. Jung devoted his life to studying symbols and dreams, not as mystical phenomena, but as a living language of the unconscious. According to him, the unconscious does not speak in logical sentences. It speaks in images, in metaphors, in symbols both personal and collective. In a dream, you may encounter a room you have never seen before, but that is strangely familiar. You may find yourself falling endlessly, or being chased by someone. These images are not random. They carry messages, not from the outside, but from the unspoken part of you. A woman dreamed that she was swimming underwater and could not come up. When she woke up, she felt exhausted for no apparent reason. Through analysis, she realized that she had been suppressing her emotions for years, always trying to stay calm and pretend to be strong in every situation. The water in the dream was a symbol of her repressed emotions, and her inability to come up reflected the suffocation she had never dared to face. The dream was more than a reflection. It was an invitation, a call for her to stop, look deeply, and allow herself to feel. Jung believed that every dream is an attempt by the soul to communicate with the conscious mind. It is a bridge between the part of yourself that you know and the part that you don't know. And the interesting thing is, when you start paying attention, dreams start to become clearer. Symbols appear not only in sleep, but in everyday life. You see an image over and over again, a number that appears in many places, a sentence from someone that makes you cry without knowing why. They are all signs, not for everyone, but for you, because the unconscious does not speak in general. It speaks to the part of you that needs to be awakened. Symbols can be anything: a blocked road, an open door, an unknown animal. a face you have never seen in real life. They awaken you not with clarity, but with a feeling that you cannot ignore. They move the soul in a way that words cannot. And in the process of individuation, symbols act as maps. Not maps with detailed instructions, but maps of intuition. They don't lead you in a straight line. They make you stop, reflect, and choose a path that defies all logic you've ever known. The soul doesn't call out to you in a loud voice. It whispers. It sends signals. It uses symbols to suggest what everyday language can't contain. And if you continue to ignore it, continue to live too fast, too busy, too rationally, you will miss the most precious thing, your real life. One of the most important aspects of this journey is learning to notice. Note your dreams. Write down how strange it feels when a certain symbol repeats itself. Don't analyze it, just note it, because noting is the beginning of connection. And connection is what the unconscious needs to continue sending messages. You don't have to be an analyst to understand symbols. Just be honest. Someone who dares to look back. The one who dares to stay with an image long enough for it to speak for itself. Jung believed that within each of us there is an archetype called the self, the whole being, that guides you back to yourself. Symbols are the self's way of showing the way, not to success, but to truth, to healing, to reconnecting the light and the dark, the conscious and the unconscious, the living and the living. You may have thought of symbols as something alien, reserved for art, or the mystical. But if you've ever cried at a song for no apparent reason, stopped when you saw a scene that made your heart stop, felt like your name was being called when reading a passage, then you've touched a symbol. And at that moment, your soul has spoken. The important thing is not that you understand right away, it's that you listen. You are willing to slow down, ask questions, and walk with more open eyes, more tender hearts. Because symbols are not for the mind to control. They are for the heart to seek. When you start living like this, you will realize this world has never stopped talking to you. It speaks through every image, every dream, every little fragment of life. And if you listen long enough, you will realize that what you are looking for is not far away. It is calling you, every day, in the language of your soul. At that moment, every step is no longer wandering. Every image, every feeling, every dream becomes a compass. And you no longer live only for your ego. You live for a calling that no one else can hear for you. Your own calling, the calling of your soul. After all the depths you have gone through, the crisis, the descent, the darkness, the distraction, the journey of integration, and the calling of the soul, you begin to return. But this return is not what you imagined. There is no celebration, no halo, no applause. There is only a strange silence, a sense that you have known this place before, but you are no longer the same person. Carl Jung called this the final stage of integration, when you return to the world, but no longer controlled by the masks you lived with. You re-enter the same spaces, re-engage with the same people, do the same things. But this time, you bring with you a reshaped core. And while your appearance may be the same as before, your presence is no longer the same. You no longer seek to fit in everywhere. You no longer need to be understood, approved, or honored. You no longer feel the need to argue to prove anything. You accept that some people will no longer resonate. Some relationships will not be the same. Some things that were once important will now fall away. And you let them fall, without resentment, without regret, because you have learned the most important lesson. Losing what is no longer yours is a liberation, not a defeat. You begin to live with choice. Not a choice out of fear or control, but a choice out of clarity. You know where to stop, who to keep. What is the non-negotiable truth? You learn to say no, to be silent, to walk away from things that make your soul shrink. And each such decision is no longer an internal battle, but a natural action of a person who has returned to himself. What makes you different is not your words, but your presence. You walk into a room and do nothing for others to feel your stillness. No more struggling to impress. No more struggling to be seen. You are simply present, fully, without hiding, without lacking. You are no longer swept away by your emotions. Not because you have become numb, but because you have learned to observe rather than react. You allow yourself to feel, but you are no longer driven by the undercurrents. You can sit in sadness without feeling weak. You can be in joy without feeling in a hurry to hold on. You can face loneliness without feeling empty. You have become strong enough to stand in any state without losing yourself. This return is not the end. It is the beginning of a different way of living. Living from the inside out. Living with oneness between feeling, thinking, and doing. Living without being understood, but always knowing yourself. And the strange thing is, it is when you stop trying to be loved that you become more lovable than ever. Not because you please anyone, but because you touch what every human being craves. Truth. Coming back, but transformed, means you no longer have to search for yourself in the world. You bring with you an inner world that has been built from the fragments. A world where you are the keeper, where silence is strength and sincerity is the common language. And when you live from that world, you don't just change yourself. You become a touch point, a quiet place where others can begin to listen to themselves again. That is the greatest gift of the journey. Not a destination, but a kind of presence. Clear, steady, no longer needing to be anyone, because you are already yourself. And this time, for real. Finally, when you have gone through all the depths of the journey, from the vague insecurity, the forgotten shadow, the sweet distractions, to the silent transformation of individuation, you stand before a space no longer tinged with confusion, but filled with lucid silence. And in that silence, a question returns, simpler than ever. Is this life, after all, the life you were born to live? Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." The greatest privilege of a human life is not to be praised, not to be successful, not to be loved in a pleasant way. It is to become yourself, fully, not because someone asked you to, but because your soul cannot continue to live half-heartedly. You begin to see clearly a truth. Life has never wasted you. It has only waited for you to be fully present. Every mistake you've ever made, every choice you've regretted, every relationship you've ever hurt, it's all part of the map that leads you home. There's no wasted space. There's no meaningless wound. Because if you've never been lost, you'll never know what it's like to be found. You don't have to start over. You just have to start where you are, with the honesty you're afraid to. You don't have to have a grand plan. Just ask yourself every day, what is true for me today? And have the courage to live it, however small, however solitary, however contrary to outside expectations. Your life wasn't designed to be duplicated. It wasn't designed to be a race. It wasn't designed to be accepted. It was designed to express the one thing that no one else can replace: your unique presence. If you don't live your life, no one else will. And that is not just your loss, but the world's loss. The world does not need more perfect people. It needs real people. People who dare to stand in their vulnerability without losing their souls to stand. People who dare to step out of the mold, not to rebel, but to return. And if you are reading this, perhaps you have begun to hear that call within yourself. There is no need to rush. There is no need to do everything right. Just don't turn away. Because once you hear the call of your soul, you can never forget it. Live, but not as a shadow repeating old expectations. Live as someone who has been given this unique opportunity to be present, truly. Not to impress, not to be chosen, but to enter the world with a wholeness that comes from within. This is the life you were born to live. No more, no less, but real and enough.